December Finance and Shared Services meeting. We are already a few minutes late, so I am going to get started with the first item on the agenda, which is the attorney invoices. Any questions from the board members present? All right, we're going to move on to the next big item on the agenda, which is the bill list. Any questions? I know I did have a few. Well, I'll start, and then if anybody else wants to, ask anything more, can do that. So I believe the total amount for this month's bill list till date is $8.9 million. Laura, this is just for what we have till today.
That's correct. There'll be an addendum coming out early next week.
Okay.
Yes.
And the only thing that came out, the couple questions that I had this time was, starting from check 1043 to 1056, is it all renewals related to our tech department, the CDWG, the SHE International, SysCloud? Are they all yearly renewals?
Those look like all, yes.
Which one are we from?
Or 1043? So this is not the ones that we're gonna pay now.
Yeah.
I think starting page number is 10 or 11.
Yes.
Because the amounts seem to vary from 5.7 to all the way $100,000 in one of them. I just wanted to confirm, are these yearly or?
Yes, these are mostly yearly. I'm just looking at them, yearly renewals that we have. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Mostly all tech, right?
Yes.
All of these, okay. The other question I had was, and this is just random for my knowledge, how do we do the procurement? I saw two vendors being used, like there are two checks for soccer balls. One going off to a vendor named Sportsman, which is check 1243, and another is going out to BSN Sports, which is check 1212. Now, is this because of middle school, high school, or why are we using, and thankfully, because you put that little subheading, it tells us what the check is, what the exact thing is for. It does say soccer ball for both of them.
That is totally up to what the athletic director, what they put in. Maybe there's, I don't know, there's different.
So
well, they do there's different vendors
soccer.
that will be able to get them their product in different timelines. So if BSN Sports has it in stock and they need it, or all these vendors have thresholds in which we can spend with them, correct?
Yeah.
So once we hit a threshold for, say, BSN, we need to switch to a different vendor. I just remember going through that every year as as you get to the spring sports, that's when you start to cap out on different vendors.
And I think that's exactly what my question was. Is it the AD's office that is ordering it, or do the various coaches do it on their own? So it could be the middle school coaches using another vendor.
Yes, in fact,
And the high school coaches using another vendor,
That's
because the
very
quantity looked
likely.
like, the cost looked like it was one team versus three teams, kind of.
and normally, what was the other one, the BS?
So one was 1243, which is $237, and the other is 1212, which is $986 for BSN Sports.
Actually, they're both coming from high school, so I don't know, why.
They're both coming from high school?
One could be from the phys ed department, one could be
Okay.
from, so you get a different kind of soccer ball.
That makes sense.
Yep.
That makes sense. All right. So I just wanted to know that is our purchasing system for athletic, is it centralized? We do have approved vendors, and that's all that they can go to. But is everybody making their own decisions, or is AD's department making the decision?
Well, I would say the coaches make the decision, or they put the order in, and the athletic director would then approve it or not approve it, and then it would go on to curriculum to Dr. Lehman, and then finally to my office for approval. But they're the ones that started. Yeah, we have a very great system there, but they would start that requisition process. Probably the coach or the teacher would start that.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. So there's a whole chain of command there.
There is.
This goes.
Yeah, you can't go any further after, if someone doesn't approve it, it doesn't go any further in the system. You can't keep going.
Any other questions on the bill list? Anybody else? All right, we'll wait for the
I
addendum.
actually do have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
1074.
Yes,
Is that
yes,
for an ethics matter
yes. Yes, it is.
that we haven't reached the
This is
deductible
one that
for
we
yet?
have, this is one that we have reached our threshold on, so this is our.
We have reached
Your
our
time.
threshold on it. Okay, so this is above, we
This is
we
above
paid the
5,000.
right, we paid the 5,000 already.
And now the insurance, we've exhausted our insurance, and now it's.
And now-
back to
so
us
this
to
is
fix
extra.
Wait, the insurance is also over?
That we've reached our threshold with the insurance company, so we put in our deductible.
Mhm.
And then we have a certain amount that we can spend with the insurance
Yeah.
company,
Right.
we've reached that, and now we have gone beyond that, so I'm just curious.
Yeah, there's a couple in here, this month that, for those, I think it's 3 cases where we reached our threshold.
Yeah.
Now we are, and I can let you know, if you want, I can report that out
Okay, yeah,
every month, how much is.
Yeah.
Coming back to us.
yeah, that would be great.
Is this what we discussed
Yeah.
in the meeting, 2021? 2021 cases?
Correct. Mhm.
Anybody else, any questions? Seeing none, we're gonna go to, Laura, do you want to take up the Genesis proposal?
So this is something that was already brought to curriculum, I believe, or now,
It
at
did,
some point last year.
in the last school year, it was brought up to curriculum, and then no decision was made. It was deferred into finance, I think, for a decision.
Yes.
Like, we did agree that there was a need, but the
Yeah.
finance was supposed to, this committee is supposed to decide whether we can go ahead with it.
Yes. So at this point, we're just looking at the HR function, which is, they would like to get, in order to get it in full gear for next, start now, I think in January, like, with onboarding basically, and then, it would be all ready for, the next school year. So this is just HR, it would be $25,000, for the year, that's the cost for the year. After that, it's $5,000 a year.
So we currently use CSI and Genesis for HR. So when an employee is entered into our system or they're a member of our system, they live in 2 different locations. Genesis is the tool that districts use to communicate with NJ Smart, which is our link to the state essentially for both students and staff. We do annual reporting, a lot of the school report card stuff comes out of it, licensure and things like that. So we do pay CSI an annual fee as well as an annual backup fee and things like that. So we would not need the HR piece of CSI anymore. So we would that would drop off from that fee as an annual fee from CSI, and it would be replaced by this fee from Genesis. So outside of the setup cost, which is a 6-month process of basically taking everything from anything that we do paper now, which is just about everything, or anything that we do with exporting to Genesis and then manually changing numbers and things like that, that would all be merged. The paper documents would be digitized. Employees would then have a portal that they could go in and have an archival record of their contracts, annual contracts. Right now, we use Excel mail merge, create PDFs, email documents, email contracts, as opposed to digitally disperse them through an online system. At the end of the school year, attendance is pulled down through an Excel file. That is what we have as an archival record. It's a series of Excel files for attendance, as opposed to having a record of, what is the staff attendance? You can go in and pull up year 22, 23 and look at what their attendance record was then. These are individual sub files. After we do that and the year flips over, then it is re-uploaded and then adjusted with new vacation days, sick days, personal days, So that's all manually done. Genesis would then, merge all that together. We can do staff evaluations in there. That wouldn't be something we're transitioning to this year, but it was something we can definitely do in the future. So it definitely automates, eliminates all the touch points, timestamps things. So when staff members finish their degree process and they submit for a change in pay or submit their paperwork, we have an interoffice mail. It goes into the main office. It's delivered by car in a confidential folder. Then it's all done. So the work that the HR department is doing in reviewing documents doesn't change, but the processes are much more efficient. It's a digital piece. It's coming in line with actually our PO acquisition process. POs used to be manually handwritten and created. A couple of years ago, we went into the CDK process. So now we have a digital process. We do have a digital process for professional development. We went through that many, many years ago for approval process. Same thing with field trips. This is just taking us up and really putting us where we should be in terms of technology. So the upfront cost is the setup cost. I think the annual maintenance piece, we don't need to back it up. Genesis is all stored with us, and our backup of Genesis is something we already do. It's embedded in what we have. So there's no additional backup charges or fees or anything like that. Just to give you more I just want to give you more context about what the Genesis School 5 piece is. There are districts all around us that use it. I have a list I can pass it around if you want to see. There's a payroll module. There's things that, for the future to consider potentially or look at other solutions. But this is certainly a piece that, staff that are coming here from other districts,
are surprised.
they've been doing this for probably,
That we have to.
they've been doing this for 10 years. And the amount of paper we're pushing around, there's a greater chance for mistakes. And you see on the board agendas all the time that there are frequently adjustments to salary guides and things like that are not just because someone got a degree and we're making the corrections. It's something in the manual process when you're dealing with 1,200 to 1,300 employees. There's a lot of hands and a lot of eyes and a lot of columns and things to make sure they get corrected. So that's just what it is, because I know not everyone was a part of that discussion initially.
So last year when we had this discussion in Kirkland, when this was proposed, I think it was after the workshop sometime, because I know we were talking to the Genesis team during the workshop. Most of us agreed that this is way overdue for a district our size with over 1,200 staff members. This is way overdue. We've been still doing paper and manual stuff, which is a lot of overhead in terms of, resource time as well. The only concern at that time was the cost and also the onboarding costs. And I mentioned this in the pre-meeting to Dr. Chanley and Laura, that would there be extensive training needed? Would the onboarding time have a cost of its own? But it seems to me there's not so much. And Genesis is a platform that we're all very familiar, internally very familiar with, right? So it'll be an easier onboarding, same to similar platform.
So technology, Mr. Feldman was a part of the initial discussion with this, and he says in terms of what weight or what impact it has on his staff, they're living in Genesis right now. This is just them working with learning a new module. We don't need additional hard drive space or anything, structurally or material related to that.
And while we are very cognizant of what new things we are going to be spending money on at this point of time, this is definitely something that Dr. Chanley mentioned we have money budgeted for, and looking at the cost versus the benefits is definitely something that I recommend this committee prioritizes. So we will make a recommendation to the board.
I have a couple questions. Do we pay for the system we're using now?
Yes.
And what do we pay for them a year?
You want me to, I
I
pulled
can
it up.
tell you,
I mean,
we pay,
is it
What does CSI stand for? You know?
Computer Solutions Incorporated or something like that.
It's just,
Nine.
or something else.
we pay 13 just for maintenance?
no,
Or-
for the software, supports and the data backup for the cloud. So the 6,000 is for the cloud backup and $7,900 is for the,
And then do we pay a maintenance fee to
HR.
them?
That's the whole fee.
That's the whole
For
thing.
whole year
So-
For payroll and for, HR.
So that's their annual fee. So this guy's annual fee is 5,000. If we take the HR module out of that, and then the backup space needed, it's
But don't we already, so we have Genesis?
Yep.
And we pay them for a system maintenance fee for Genesis now.
we pay
So
them
now
an
we're gonna-
annual fee.
We're gonna pay they're gonna add 5,000 to our existing fee, or if
Yeah.
we're already
Yeah,
in
for
Genesis?
this module that we don't have
And
from
then
Genesis
what
right
is,
now.
what is a third-party software interface are available on an annual fee of $350 each? Is that something we would need a lot of? Like, there's a bunch of questions I've related to this, like,
Yeah, so
there's like little things in here that, like, do we need one? Do we need 200? Like,
yeah, and
and it says Genesis isn't responsible for copyright materials being used by the end using staff.
so that would be if we're using a copyrighted form, they're not responsible for the copyrighted form that we're having them convert and work with us. They're the tool in which we're using that copyrighted form or something like
Could
that.
we find those things out? Like, what do we pay now, their annual maintenance fee for them for Genesis? You know what we're paying them now here?
Those two things aren't similar, right? What we are
It's the same
paying
company.
Genesis, it's the same company, but
Yeah,
it's a
I'm just
different.
curious, like, what we're spending.
Okay. But from the CSI, comparison should be to CSI, and it's cheaper than CSI.
It's cheap.
The annual
I'm
fee.
gonna say, CSI is payroll and HR.
It's payroll also.
Yeah,
So
this is
I don't
HR.
know, it
have
doesn't
to pay
break
for
it
payroll
down
through that.
under what's payroll and what's HR is combined.
Okay,
That's what I mean, there's,
Yeah.
but we
we
will.
could
keep
switch to
copy.
them, and then next year we'll switch to like, I would like to know, like, apples to apples, like, is Genesis willing to come down their price to have all our business? I mean, everything's negotiable.
So first question to answer would be, what would be the price of CSI minus HR? Because that would give you how much was CSI charging for HR, and then how much is Genesis gonna charge for their HR module?
So they want 25 grand, what are we paying for?
So the 25 grand is set up, but the annual charge is, it's only gonna be 5,000 a year.
That's without payroll.
Without payroll, right? If we add another payroll,
Module, I have to pay for,
right?
If we do add.
I would like to know, like,
it will
what
be-
the,
right.
what the module is compared, like the payroll and this. So we have an idea if we're gonna switch, if it's, a couple thousand more and they add payroll, but if they're gonna say 50,000 for payroll, then,
Just stick to this.
yeah, I mean, I would like to know. I
For
think
now,
we
until
should
we get
find
more
out
information.
exactly what we're getting and what CSI does. See what Genesis is gonna charge us to do the same exact thing.
Yeah, I can certainly get that for you and share it with you. Yep.
And then same thing with, maybe you could talk to Mr. Feldman about the third-party software interfaces. Is there a lot of them? Is there 1, 20, 30, 200?
Yeah, that's a variable part.
This way
So what is it
we'll
that-
have an idea of what we're gonna pay for that.
If we need any.
If we need any,
need
that's what I mean,
it,
we may
it's
need
just a
none.
disclaimer, right,
That's what I don't,
right.
I'm not a tech person.
I
so I
would
don't
think,
know.
just an example of a third-party connection would be is if we use, Schoology has a student management system equivalent to Genesis.
Yeah,
So if we had Genesis HR and we wanted it to link with the Schoology version of our student management system, we'd probably have to pay Genesis to make that connection.
How long do
But
we
are there
have-
any other examples that we would need? Yep.
How long do we have the service with CSI or?
So CSI is an annual contract.
Yes.
And what Genesis would do is starting in January, begin to work with HR and probably everyone else to take about 6 months
Right.
to have us ready to go with Genesis HR in July.
CSI is a very secure company, so you have it for many years with the school?
We've had it for at least 5, right? 5.
Yeah, so that's a good amount of time.
But yeah.
Yep.
Maybe even longer.
I mean,
It's
we're
been
gonna
quite a
pay
while.
double the price for half the work we're getting done. Think about it, in reality, with no payroll. Now
Wait,
we
wait,
have payroll.
So I think the questions that need to be asked, and maybe we can delay this vote by a month to Mr.
Find
Pure-
out what-
Right, find out, are we satisfied with our current payroll system with CSI? Is it too big of a project to look to move that to Genesis? What's the cost of moving it to Genesis? Because The only reason I'm asking this is because of what Mr. Pure brought up, because we're all convinced that from an HR perspective, we're too manual, we're too outdated in our processes, and CSI is not supporting us. Right? Is that right? Genesis will support us in becoming at par with what the industry trends are with HR management tools. Is the payroll component and is adding the payroll component and putting everything with Genesis a better idea at what cost? Or I think just a few more facts before we make a decision. I think we're all convinced about one part, but he's got a point here that let's look at the bigger picture and maybe if we need to shell out a few thousand. Today is $25,000 to onboard this module. If we add payroll to it and they say $35,000 and the overall annual maintenance fee is $7,000. Versus we paying two vendors and still continuing to pay more than that. So we don't know. I may be wrong in the random things I said, and if you think we're missing some facts.
We can provide, so if the potential end game is either staying with or moving away from what the current payroll piece is,
Yeah.
what does the total package look like, both paths down the road?
Right.
We can do that.
And would it matter if we delayed this vote, because we're talking January so a month down the lane is not an issue.
Well, in the October board meeting is actually pretty early in October, so it's not a long time. I
Okay,
think we have the
perfect.
board meeting, then we may have a week off.
Yes,
Then
that's
it's
how.
committees, and then it goes right to the board meeting again.
All right.
So it's really probably like a 2-week delay.
Okay, so at this point, we're bringing it back to the administration to come back with a little bit more.
Little more.
We'll
That's fine.
consider this in the finance committee meeting. We're not against the HR component, we want to get a bigger picture.
Sure.
So we know we want, right? Payroll? What do
You
we pay?
want
And the third party.
apples to apples.
Third party, like, yeah, just so
Yep.
we have, make sure we know when we ask, exactly.
All
Yep.
right. The next item on the agenda is, nobody else had any comments right here, is the shared services agreement. The reason we have that, and Laura, I can speak to this part. In the last Board of Ed meeting, the policy 7510 was up for discussion. And we sort of realized that when we went into a shared services agreement in February of 2024, with the township for the Applegate renovations, where the township gave us $5 million. It was at that point decided that the township will get to use all the district facilities free of cost. And there was some back and forth on the security aspect of that shared service agreement. And I had that agreement in front of me and I'm going to read.
Board members have.
Cause that was always,
executive
the
contract.
town always used the schools prior to the rod grant, free of charge. They've always been the level, whatever you call the
One,
first.
Tier one.
Tier one, the township's always been a tier one, way before the rod grant,
So-
forever, for as long as. From.
For
prior to being a
recreation and
police
other
officer.
related programs and municipal purposes for
Mhm.
5 years, and a right to use the school for such purposes for a period of 15 years, commencing as the date of the agreement. Such use of the school and other facilities by the township shall be subject to and in accordance with this agreement, including without limitation, Section 3 hereof, B, during times that do not interfere with the board's normal and customary use of the school and other school facilities, and C, without cost to the township, except that the township shall provide security methodology related to the use of the school and other school facilities by the township as mutually agreed upon by the board and the township. So the point of discussion here is that we've put the onus of security on the township in the shared service agreement, whereas our regulation 7510, in section E of that regulation, under the heading for the rules of use of school facilities, point B says that minimum one security officer must be on duty and is paid for by the board. So those two things don't align. In our regulations, we are clearly saying that there will be one security officer and that board will pay for that security officer, and the shared services agreement is putting that squarely on the, so because this was brought up as a gap in the last Board of Ed meeting, and this is a shared services agreement, Finance Committee is bringing it up for a discussion to what is the right, need to fix this gap. And we've come to a term, we cannot afford to pay for we cannot afford to pay for security guards for every time the township is using the building. So, I think the recommendation is to pass this back to the lawyer to see how they can review the shared service agreement and tie it into our regulations in a way that it clarifies in the regulations also when XYZ is using the facilities, they are responsible for the onus of security is on them and the board is not going to be paying the security guard. So that's why this is on the agenda tonight. Did anybody have any thoughts on this?
I mean, it's always been the township used the schools, and if anything happens in the schools, they've always been responsible.
I think it's
We
more-
never provided security
Yeah,
for the township, and that's because there are kids using the schools, rec basketball, rec baseball, girls softball. I mean, to me, we let them use the schools. And, we never want anything to happen, but honestly, if something happens, it has nothing to do with the Board of Education. It's
so to your
totally
point,
the township, they take the insurance, just like a township building. So I mean, I think the only thing we would affect if we, made them hire security guards or whatever, is it's gonna affect youth programs. And I think.
no, we're
that-
beyond that in the discussion.
Yeah.
So, and I'll bring you up to speed. Yes, we've been allowing them to
Mhm.
use,
Yeah.
and we've not provided security guards, but there were instances where doors were left open.
Mhm.
People who shouldn't be in the building were in the building. And so when this shared service agreement was being brought up, these concerns were raised with the rec department, asking them to take onus of the security. And of course, they said the same thing. If we were to hire security guard, the cost of the rec programs would go up, and it's a fair concern. It's whether children going to school or children going to the rec programs, it's the same town, same taxpayer pocket, we get it. If I'm paying $100 for a rec program, I don't want to start paying $150. We get it. But at the same time, the board cannot take the liability or pay for a security guard as well.
But.
Our environment was not safe. So we needed to, and that's why we went back and forth on that with the town to say that there were coaches that were supposed to have this training and were supposed to be strictly monitoring it. We're not doing it. Rec did admit to that yes, it's time for reminders, it's time to enforce that training strictly, put the onus on the rec department. Because we were feeling the need, we did say, put security in, they can't afford security. So
Okay.
the discussion at this point
I
is not
agree
to
with you
hire.
100%.
Right, it's not to hire security,
But
but
what
just
I
to
did
put the onus
When I
on
was the
them.
head of security here, if the custodian at Berkeley Brook School called Mr. Tate or called me and said, because I used to tell him, if you have a problem with rec, you're to call me. And they would call me up and say, hey, I have this issue at school right now. And I would call Mary Lang or Jean, and I'd say, get to the school right now, take care of this.
Wait,
If it doesn't occur, if it occurs again, they won't be allowed to use the school. Like, what needs to happen is somebody, and as far as the doors being open, what I used to make them do is I would tell the custodian, it's your school, it's your option, they're here from 6 to 7. If you want to open one door for them, what my suggestion is, at 6 o'clock, you meet the coach here, the coach stands here, brings all his kids in, close the door behind them, and when they leave, they all leave together. I mean, it's a lot of policing that needs to, and if you call them, they'll interact and they'll do something, but if nobody calls and then people complain, then.
so here's the
it's a
point,
lot of-
it's not the custodian's
Yeah.
responsibility and we
Well,
cannot.
they have to
make
let
it
them in the school.
Right, no,
They're the only one there.
and
They
then
can't
from
get
that
in.
point on, from that point.
That's what I mean.
The custodian is probably down the hallway in some
Oh, absolutely.
cleaning, right? So
But that's not
It's
because of
that-
the regulation.
But that's what I said
Right,
to the
it's-
custodian, you let the coach in, and then go to your work. You have to let them in anyway, they can't get in the building
they
without the
can't get,
custodian.
but
And then it's up to the coach to do it, and I used to tell the custodians, if there's an issue, or they're blocking the door, or they're doing something, here's my cell phone, you call me, and I would call Mary or Jean, and it would stop that day.
for decades, we've been handling it without any
Yeah.
issues, right? It's all about being right on the paper.
Mhm.
So,
Right now, there's a gap. what we agreed to with the town is not what our regulation says. We need that to kind of line up and be on the same page, so go ahead.
So the day after the board meeting, Mr. Weiss reached out because he was present for the.
Yes, he was,
Initial conversation at the board meeting, and, Ms. Allen shared the shared services, I shared, the policies. And, we can certainly follow up to him, because I know he thinks it could be as simple as in the policy, just saying, and providers to provide and pay for security unless otherwise, determined in a shared
Shared
services
service
agreement
agreement.
or something like that, then it covers the rec,
Everybody.
which is the
Right.
only exception at this
Just
current moment.
At this point, yeah.
But he has the documents. I can give him a call tomorrow, and just see where he is in terms of what his recommendation is.
And then
we
that could go to
from
the
there.
policy
But
committee, whatever.
that, he just was gonna help close the gap on the language between the two.
Yes.
The practice is different, right?
Mhm.
What actually happens in terms of who's calling who and interacting is different.
It's
But
different,
but if there was a gap and it could be closed with a simple change instead of having, it's certainly not touching shared services. But in terms of just putting that one statement or whatever, because I think that's kind of what he narrowed it down to at the board.
right,
meeting, was
because at
adding
this
a little
point,
waiver.
yeah, it just says it's paid for by the board. Or we could say, just that whole part, because it says minimum of one security guard. That's what our policy use regulation says, has to be present. That's one of the rules. Now, we're not enforcing that rule for our shared service agreement. So there's definitely a gap. And I'm sure the lawyer will find an easy way to.
Yep. Yep, and he has both documents, and I can follow up with him tomorrow.
All right.
And just,
And-
so he's prepared to have a response or something at the board meeting when it comes up in the minutes. and
Right,
things like
so at this point, I think whatever Mr. Weiss comes back with goes to the policy committee and then they can make the change. And, all right, we can go to the renewals, Laura.
Okay, so we have the two, what is it? Renewals. One is for the North Brunswick Township, aquatics pool. We used
So we-
them last year.
Yeah, so this is where the swim team has its meets.
Mhm.
So we we have to cut them a check at some point to pay for our home meets and things like that, which we don't have a pool, so they're gonna be here. And then they also have a few practices scheduled because this is a hard walled pool. Their regular practice pool is a softball pool, so they can't practice their kicks and turns. So where they do most of their practicing, they swim, and a lot of these are club swimmers and they do a lot of practicing, but they did request several practices so they can practice their kicks and things on the wall.
So the
this is-
total cost is about $4,600.
Yep, and this is a consistent expense with the swim team.
Okay. Any
And
questions?
it'll come up every year, because again,
Yes. Mhm.
we pay them for home meets, because we don't have a home pool, just like we pay the ice rink for the ice meets or ice competitions, and then, we'll pay them for a few
The
practices.
difference from last year is you're doing it well in advance this time. I know we kind of ran this through last
Well,
minute.
so this would have been done a little earlier, because we did approve the other pool. We were trying to do them in the spring for the entire coming year, right? So in May or June for the entire next school year, we've been trying to approve them as, future vendors. But these guys weren't prepared to give us a quote when we were ready to do the initial piece.
Very good. All right. The next one.
And this is for, Steve Ignali Consulting LLC for, cheer, it's a routine enhancement. But the director.
Yeah, I mean, this is again, this is a part of the operating the cheer program in terms of designing routines and,
We've done this every year.
yeah, it's a different vendor this time, but it's,
We also have a different coach. Maybe that's why a different one.
could be, yep. But we have to pay licensing fees for music. Then we pay for, just like the marching band uses consultants to design their, marching programs and things like that. These are all embedded in budgeted expenses for our athletics.
All right, any questions, anybody? We're all done with the agenda. Thank you, everybody, for your time. This concludes the Finance Committee meeting for September. Thank you, everyone.